Hello everyone, I'm Shruti Kunthekar, Marketing Manager at CloseSync. Thank you for joining us in our Close monthly webinar. Today we will be discussing about getting started with ServiceNow Discovery and how it's the first step towards better IT operations management. Pranav, would you like to share your screen at this point?
Sure. Shruti, just confirm me if you're able to see my screen.
Yes, I am. Thank you. So here's the agenda. I'm going to take a few minutes to go through housekeeping, talk about Close, followed by the presentation, and finally the Q&A. Next slide, please. This webinar will be recorded and you will be able to access it later. For Q&A, you're on mute. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A section in your Zoom control panel and our panelists will answer them. If you have any questions that are not directly related to this webinar, please email me at shruti@closing.com or sales@closing.com. Our social media channels are listed here. You can access our previous webinars at our Close channel. Next, please. A little about Close. We are a ServiceNow partner since 2011, based out of Santa Clara, very close to the ServiceNow headquarters. We are a full ServiceNow shop with 250 plus customers, 400 plus implementations, and we have executed projects globally. Next slide, please. In terms of services, we provide end-to-end services. Our focus has been on CSM, end user portals, and HRSD. Our panelist today is Pranav. Pranav, next slide, please. So Pranav is our technical consultant at CloseSync. And Pranav, thank you for joining us. I will let you take over.
Thank you, Shruti, for the warm welcome. So guys, let's start off with first what we're going to cover in this session today. So firstly, we're going to talk about the ITOM. Then we'll just review our concepts about CMDB. Then we'll start our discussion on the discovery and mid-server. Then we'll have a quick demo of how we can have how we can discover a particular CI. I'll just show you how we can discover our own system that we are using. And then we'll talk about some of the best practices for implementing discovery. And then after implementing discovery, what's next after discovery? So that's what we're going to talk about today. So firstly, what is ITOM? So ITOM, or IT Operation Management in ServiceNow, is a suite of applications that work together to automate operations management within your organization. So these are the certain applications that are part of ITOM. Discovery is there, operational intelligence, event management, service mapping, orchestration, and cloud management. So in easy terms, we can say ITOM is an umbrella term for these applications. So coming to a short description of each and every application. So what is ServiceNow Discovery? So ServiceNow Discovery helps us create a single system of record for the IT infrastructure. So basically, it helps us create all the records. Basically, it helps us form the CMDB that we're going to discuss in the upcoming slide. Then comes to operational intelligence. So the ServiceNow operational intelligence proactively identifies anomalous behavior in the IT infrastructure before it causes service outage. So its main goal is it proactively identifies the anomalous behavior. And then comes ServiceNow Event Management. So ServiceNow Event Management reduces the event floods from monitoring tools and provides a single dashboard to proactively identify service issues. So one of the best part of event management is it integrates with the different monitoring tools so that it helps us it provides us a really good dashboard which can be used to monitor all the activities in our service. Then comes the service mapping. So service mapping maps the relationship between IT components and business service in a dynamic environment. So discovery and service mapping are very much linked. A lot of people get confused when we talk about discovery and service mapping. They think it's both are same, but it's not. Both are totally different. So in the end, we're going to talk about what is the difference between discovery and service mapping. So then comes our ServiceNow orchestration. So ServiceNow orchestration is it just orchestrates our or automates the IT processes on a third-party system. So it eliminates the manual task and remediates service issues. So for example, when there is a new hire in the company, so as soon as the new hire is there, we should create an LDAP account for it. So there comes orchestration. So we can use the out-of-the-box activities of orchestration to do all that stuff, to create an account directly into the server. So that's a manual job, but we can automate those things up. Then comes the cloud management. So ServiceNow Cloud Management delivers the cloud resources through self-service and reducing business risk and managing cost. So it also helps us managing all the services in the cloud, right? So today, we're going to talk about discovery application. And so these are the certain benefits of ITOM solution. If you go for the ServiceNow ITOM solution, it enhances the service visibility. It improves service availability. It increases service agility, manages hybrid clouds, and in the last, it leverages ITSM investment. So the most important one, let's talk about the fifth point, leverages ITSM investment. So basically, ServiceNow integrates with the current ServiceNow's ITSM solution so that it provides all these, it provides us in eliminating all the service outages and managing the hybrid clouds. So all these are very important stuff of ServiceNow ITOM. So now coming to CMDB. So ServiceNow CMDB can be thought of as a database containing configuration items, where configuration items are the infrastructure components. They can be hardware or software required to deliver a service. So the main key tables in the configuration CMDB is the configuration item table and the CI relationship table. So a lot of people, when I talk about CMDB, a lot of people think it's just a large database, but it's not. So the ServiceNow approach is to extend the generic configuration item table to create a new table. So the new table we call as CI classes. So where more granular information can be stored about the CI. So that's one thing that ServiceNow provides. So a lot of people think like, okay, we have the CMDB CI table is there, which will contain all the CIs and all. So it's just a large database, but it's not. So it's divided into the CIs. For example, you can talk about hardware. So hardware is a table that is extended from CMDB CI table. So all the hardware things stuffs go under it. Then hardware can have like servers, or they can have Linux servers, Windows servers, routers, all these things are there. Then there is another table for application servers are there, mail servers are there, or the applications are there. So all these things are stored in the particular classes, or we can call it tables. Then the relationship. So this table holds all the relationships between the CIs. So for example, when I talk about mail server, so mail server is part of the Windows server. So it runs on that. So all these relationship that mail server runs on Windows server, all these things are stored in the relationship table. Basically, it stores all the relationships between two CIs. So now coming to the benefits of CMDB. So it provides a single data model. So ServiceNow CMDB uses a single data model to manage all configuration data. This enables it to standardize process and data, as a result of which you don't need to update configuration changes in multiple systems. So this is one of the most powerful thing in CMDB, that it provides a single data model where you don't need to update in multiple systems, go into different places and update all these things. So that is one top quality thing of ServiceNow CMDB. Then comes the ServiceNow CMDB automatically propagates these changes across related systems, thus enabling a single system of records with minimum redundancy. So as you know, on the incident form, we have the CMDB CI field where we have like the particular CI record is there. So if there is any update that happens in the CI, whether it's in the name, that will reflect in the incident table also. So that's what's the power of ServiceNow CMDB. So now the second thing is the visualization and reporting. So its service mapping functionality provides a concise graphical view of infrastructure with relationships, dependencies, and a lot more stuff. And it has a very powerful reporting engine which enables users to generate dashboards, reports to be distributed on regular basis. So the thing is that when we are maintaining a large infrastructure, so we get lot many challenges, but those challenges can be reduced if we can visualize our stuff, what is happening. So that's what ServiceNow CMDB provides. It has its very powerful reporting engine which helps us, and its service mapping capability that's part of the ITOM, which helps us visualize all these IT infrastructure with its relationships and dependencies and a lot more stuff. And last thing, it's all in the same platform. So like you have the other ITSM solution, you have the customer service management, you have discovery, service management, service mapping, event management, orchestration. All these things are part of the same platform. So it provides an integration between all these things. So that's why it's very easy to go when you are opening an incident. You can go and select the particular CI, and because it's part of the same application, so that's how easy it becomes. So so if we say like what is in like CMD, final thoughts on CMDB, it helps key decision makers to quickly make accurate and informed decision. It will help support team to investigate and resolve issues in a timely manner. So that's what CMDB provides to the customers if it's implemented properly. So coming to now discovery. So ServiceNow Discovery, also known as Infrastructure and Application Discovery, interrogates the enterprise network for recognition and recognizable devices and application they host. So because ServiceNow is normally hosted in a data center, so instances lack the ability to access enterprise network and subnets directly, so it must delegate the work to the mid server. So basically, so we know that CMD contains all the CIs that are there. Now, there are different ways of populating the CMD. One way is like manually, but as the infrastructure are very big, so the manual updation, it's not possible. We can also, so maintaining that manual is also like a challenging thing, because the infrastructure keeps on changing. It's very volatile, it keeps on changing. So there comes ServiceNow Discovery. So basically what it will do, it will discover all the devices in our infrastructure, so making our job much more easy. And once I show you the demo, you will just see how easy it is to discover any device without like without need to worry about like the servers and other things. So that's one thing. And now coming to what's a mid server. So a mid server is nothing but management, instrumentation, and discovery. It's a lightweight Java process running under a Linux or a Windows platform that resides within the enterprise network. As the mid server's resource consumption is very low, and definitely it's controllable, so dedicated hardware is usually not required. Its sole function is to execute work requests and return the result to a ServiceNow instance for processing. In effect, a mid server can be considered a remote extension of ServiceNow instance on an enterprise network. So basically, as I talked before, so ServiceNow is hosted in the cloud, right? So it doesn't have access to any company network, any private network. So it needs to delegate its work to some other system that is called as mid server. So mid server's only job is to execute the work that is sent from ServiceNow to the mid server and return the results from of that work. And it's very lightweight, so it doesn't require a lot of it doesn't require a dedicated hardware to run this thing. So that's what a mid server is. And connections are initiated from the mid server inside the enterprise firewall. No inbound rules from the cloud instance are required. And all communication use SOAP on HTTPS port 443, meaning that all the traffic is encrypted and usually no special firewall rules or VPNs are required. So this says that so mid server, all the communication that is happening is very much encrypted and protected. So in respect of security, we don't need to worry about the security of mid server, that maybe data can go out of it, because all these things are encrypted. And coming to now, we know what is discovery now. We know about the mid server. So now how ServiceNow communicates with the mid server. So it communicates with the mid server using the ECC queue. So ECC queue, or external communication channel, is a simple database table. It's just a simple table like any other table in your system. But unlike the other tables in the system, the ECC queue is normally queried, updated, and inserted into the system, by other system. So this is like totally managed by other systems. So mid server will update this table, as well as ServiceNow will update this table. So all these things happen. So it's in the middle of mid server and ServiceNow. It's a place where the communication happens from mid server to ServiceNow, or ServiceNow to mid server. So each record in the ECC queue is a message either from the ServiceNow instance to some other system as an output message, or from some other system to the ServiceNow instance as an input message. ECC queue is the normal connection between a ServiceNow instance and other system that integrates with it. It is also a point in ServiceNow instance where mid server used in discovery or orchestration, event management, and some other integration connect together. So that's what ECC queue is. So basically it's a middle thing between ServiceNow instance and the mid server. So this diagram will show you, like, it will help you visualize how it works. So basically this is a ServiceNow ECC queue is just a table, and there are outputs and inputs that are there. So like ServiceNow sends some output to the mid server, and in return mid server processes those things and it returns the input. So that's what it does. So now let's talk about how discovery works with the use of mid server. So first step is like instructions are placed in the ECC queue as an output probe. So all these things, like the whatever the activities that needs to be performed on the infrastructure by mid server, that are placed as instructions in the ECC queue. Then the mid server polls the ECC queue and finds the work that needs to be done. That is one thing. Then on the basis of like what type of probe it is, it can be a port scan, classification, identification, or exploration port. I'll talk about these phases later on. So depending on those ports, so it will just interrogate the particular infrastructure and get the desired result for us. And then the mid server reports responses to the ServiceNow as an input record on the ECC queue. And in the last, ServiceNow processes those inputs using sensors, and it will just populate the CMDB. So one example can be like you have a Windows server. So the mid server is installed there. So what it will do is like when the phase, like in the first phase, like port scan phase, that's the first phase of discovery. So the Shazam probe is sent. So that is just as an output, it is sent to the mid server. Then what is happening is like after it is sent to the mid server processes that probe and performs the activities for that particular probe. It returns some data like in the form of input in the ECC queue. ServiceNow picks up that input, processes it, and perform the particular like processing on it, and just populate the particular CI or whatever the result is. So that's what this particular how the mid server works with discovery. So now a question comes up where mid server needs to be installed. So ServiceNow is normally hosted in ServiceNow data center, and it does not have the ability to access enterprise network directly. So this is what we already talked about. Like it resides in ServiceNow data center. So many enterprises have multiple networks, often separated by slow WAN links or security barriers, and Discovery needs to access to all of them. So Mid server can be installed behind the company firewall, allowing for communication between ServiceNow and rest of the company network. So it should be installed behind the company firewall so that it can perform the proper communication between ServiceNow and the infra. So, and one more thing that I just want to add on it is like, or as I talked about, like whatever the mid server is, it's very much controllable. So we can just enable and disable a lot of stuff in it. So in terms of security, it's very secure. So now comes the credentials. So credentials such as usernames and password or certificates are required to gain access to a computer or network device for ServiceNow Discovery. So the platform stores these credentials in an encrypted field on the credential table. So basically, like it's very simple. Like if you want to go into a ServiceNow instance, you need a username and password. Right. Similarly, if you go into any Windows Server device or Linux device or SNMP device, so you need some credentials for it or some certificates. So all these things need to be provided to the ServiceNow instance. So it is stored in a credential table in an encrypted format so that, and it's a one-way encryption. So what I mean by one-way encryption is that this thing cannot be decrypted again without like because there are certain things like you might be seeing two-way encryption or one-way encryption. Two-way encryption can be decrypted using the code and all, but one-way can't be decrypted like that. So that's how much secure it is. And coming to the credential part, there is always a best practice for if you are either a ServiceNow professional services or if you are a ServiceNow partner or if you are implementing the ServiceNow for any client, ask the client to enter that credential. Don't enter yourself. Ask them to enter it so that they are entering it. So it's the best practice that we should always follow with the credential. So there are different types of credential in ServiceNow. One is the SSH credential is there. And then we have the SNMP is there. Then Windows, VMware, SIM credential, AWS. So SSH credential is basically used to discover the Unix or the Linux devices. The SNMP credentials are basically used to discover the devices that run on the SNMP protocol. Windows are used for Windows devices and VMware are used for VMware vCenters running on Windows machine. So, and SIM credentials are used for storage devices. And AWS are used for the Amazon EC2 web service environment. So these are the different types of credentials that are available in ServiceNow. So you can use any of this depending on your infrastructure device. So now comes the four different phases of discovery. So these are the port scan phase, the classification phase, identification, and exploration. So let's start off with the port scan phase. So now, like we know about how discovery is, like it will go to the system, to the infra and get the particular CI through the mid server and ECCQ. But what is the process that discovery follows? So when discovery is initiated, a single SASAM probe is launched and placed in the ECCQ as an output and scanning for the open TCP ports on the network connectable nodes. So what it will do is like the first thing that is there is the SASAM. It will go to the system, to the infrastructure, and just check whether where the particular device is responding, on which particular port the device is responding. For example, like the Unix based devices usually respond on port 22 and Windows devices usually perform on port 135. So this is what this particular thing ServiceNow will make certain assumptions based on these ports. So now people will be thinking like, okay, you were telling about port 22 or port 135, but like they can change it. So actually, yes, they can change it, but these are the standard ports. So if you go to the list of standard ports, you will be seeing that the port 22 is reserved for SSH communication and port 135 is reserved for Windows communication. So all these things are like standard. That's why ServiceNow Discovery makes certain assumptions based on this scanning. So now first step is the port scan one. So Discovery makes certain assumption about the devices, application, and processes running on these ports and launches the appropriate classify props to find out what exactly it is. So if it responds to WMI, so it will classify it as Windows device. So that's what port scan does. So now the other phase that comes up is the classification phase. So now we got to know that from the SASAM probe that it is responding on 135. So it's clear that it's a Windows device. So classification, so classify sensor process the data returned from the classify probe and compare against the criteria for each class of device, attempting to classify that device specifically. So for example, if we know that it's a Windows device, so it can be a Windows 2003, 2008, 2012, like I'm talking about Windows servers. So all these Windows servers are 2003, 2008, or 2012. So that is the classification that it needs to go, because we know that it's running on port 135, that means it's a Windows, but what Windows? It's whether it's Windows Server 2003, 2008, or 12. So this is what the classification phase will do for us. It will classify it according to the particular version. We can say version for it. And then the last two things are their identification and exploration phase. So using the CMD, using the CI identifiers, an attempt is made to match information against the CMDB records. So basically, because discovery runs in a scheduled way, it will run every day, because as I told you, maybe it runs every day because you can set up this thing, but generally it's done almost every day. So as the system infrastructures are very volatile, so these things can change up, right? So now if we have the identification rules and all these things, so that if there is something that changes up, it should not create a duplicate CI, right? Suppose so there comes the identification rules, which are part of the identification phase. So suppose you have a Windows one and there is some parameter that got changed. So it should not happen like it is just creating a new CI, because ultimately those things are same. So this identification phase will take care of that thing. It will see whether I have seen you before or not. If it hasn't seen it before, it will create a new CI. If it has seen it before, then it will just update the particular CI. And in the last phase, exploration phase, patterns are launched, gathering more detailed information or what else you can tell me about yourself to populate the CI attributes accordingly. So both hardware and software. So after it is identified, okay, we need to create a new CI. Now other parameters can be taken care for in the exploration phase. So there in the exploration phase, we can have the custom probes and sensors to get certain information from the infra, or we can have the discovery patterns come into picture in the exploration phase. So this is in a nutshell what the phases of discovery will do. So port scan phase will say, are you there? How will I classify you? Classification will say, how should I classify you specifically? And identification phase will say, have I seen you before or not? And exploration phase will say, what else can you tell me about yourself? So it's very simple. So firstly, it goes to the particular device. It will see on which port it's working. And based on that, it will run the particular classification probes. And then it will classify that thing, and it will, depending on whether it was there in the infrastructure or not, it will create or update the particular CI. And in the exploration phase, it will get more details about that. So that's how the discovery is, the full process of discovery is. So these are the four major phases in discovery: port scan phase, classification phase, identification phase, and exploration. So these things should be always taken care into account when we are implementing discovery. So now coming to some of the best practices for implementing discovery. So for implementing discovery, we should always follow a phased approach. So what I mean by a phased approach is like because it's very easy to just enable the discovery plugins, add the particular IP ranges, and click on discover now, and it will discover all these things. But if you do in this way, so there are a lot of chances of errors that can come up, right? So that errors, to reduce those errors, like we should always follow a phased approach. We should start with the critical devices, like the Windows devices are there, or the Linux servers are there. Then we should go into the less critical devices. So the critical or less critical devices totally varies based on the system, right? So based on the like particular client, how they exactly classify those things, whether it's a critical or non-critical device. So always it's a best practice to follow a phased approach. So next thing is the review your class architecture. So sometimes what happens is like a particular device can run on the same protocols. Like it can like run on, it can be an SNMP device, or it can be an Linux SSH, it can run on different protocols at the same time. So this is very much common in an infrastructure. So that in that this way, you should be knowing that where it needs to be classified. So always sit with the infra team to see whether this classify, whether what's the class architecture, how these things need to be classified, so that you can create a proper class criteria for that. And always, like when I am implementing any discovery project or something, so I keep one thing in mind, that we can't be subject matter experts for everything. So it's always to consult the proper infra team, so that you get a proper knowledge on that particular classes. So next thing is like the minimize manual updates to CMDB. So this is something like always happen in a with in any CMDB. So just the CMDB admins or the class admins go to a particular class and open a particular CI and just update it, right? So this thing is like, it causes a lot of issue, because discovery is also running, and later on it will just update that thing up if there's any change and all. So this should be always like all these manual updates should be very less. And if you should like, if there is any need for that manual update, it should follow a proper change control process, so that all these manual changes take place in a controlled way. So this is very important thing that should be taken care. And the last thing is like understanding the KPIs or the success criteria. So basically always, like when you are getting a new product or something, you should always consider like what is the benefits of it. So all these KPIs will help you whether you have achieved your target or not, whether this particular product is helpful for you or not. So for example, discovered versus non-discovered CI. So before, like this can be a KPI where, like before implementing discovery, there were only 20 servers in the CMDB, but after we got into discovery, we got like 80 or something. So this is should be taken care. So all these KPIs are totally dependent on the client or the customer that's implementing those things, because there are certain standard KPIs, but sometimes those doesn't make sense to certain clients because they are not into that particular thing. So always, like from my experience, I can just say that these KPIs are mostly dependent on client. It can vary in different ways. And one last thing that I have mentioned with a gap, the reconciliation rules in data source precedence. So what these things are, basically, if you have multiple sources updating your CMDB table. So basically what happens is like you have certain integrations with your ServiceNow. So what it does is like it will also try to update your CMDB, right? And discovery is also updating those things. So there come these reconciliation rules in data source precedence, which will help to in when you have multiple data sources updating your CMDB. So always use these things. So it's like if you only have discovery, then you don't need to care about these things. But if you have multiple sources, if you have multiple integrations and other things are updating CMDB, just always use these things. So this is one of the best practices from ServiceNow that they have given us. And so now after we have implemented discovery, so what's next? So the thing comes is as service mapping. So service mapping discovers all the services in an organization and builds a comprehensive map of all devices, application, and configuration profile used in these services. So it's like it will just generate all these maps. So basically, what is the difference between a service mapping and discovery is like service mapping will try to just like discover only the CIs which are related to a particular service. Whereas ServiceNow Discovery, what it will do is it will discover everything, whatever there is in the infrastructure, right? So that is the major difference between service mapping and discovery. Both uses the discovery thing, but it will only discover this, but the service mapping will only discover the CIs that are related to a particular service. Whereas the ServiceNow's horizontal discovery will discover like all the CS, whether it's all the load balancers and all, right? So that is the major difference between service mapping and discovery. So these are the major differences between service mapping. So service mapping will only discovers component of a service and ignore everything else. It allows IT operations to become service aware and provides a targeted discovery of the IT infrastructure directly related to the service. And coming to discovery, discovery finds everything, whether it's helpful or not, identifies all the devices located in an IP address range, and is very good in addressing all IT devices from an inventory perspective or for an asset management initiative. So that's the major difference between service mapping and discovery. So a lot of times people will say, okay, like we both are same, but it's not. Service mapping is a way to make your IT organization like aware of a particular to make it service aware. That's what the use of service mapping is. And discovery is like it's just normal, it will discover everything. So that's the major difference between service mapping and discovery. So guys, that's all I have for you in discovery one. And we got to know what is discovery, then we got to know what are like different phases of discovery, when we got to see the credentials and all these things. Now let's see a quick demo of how we can set up a discovery. So let me just, so guys, I'm into my ServiceNow instance. So what I'm going to do is like, first thing is like, I'll go into the mid server. I'll type the mid server here, and you can see a download options. So here you can download the particular mid server that you want. You can download 64-bit or 32 or 32 or 64 depending on your system. So in interest of time, I've already downloaded this thing. So once you download this thing, you will be able to see something like this. You will get a zip file like this. So when you extract that zip file, you will see this agent that comes up. So you can just put it anywhere in the system, because right now I'm using a normal desktop. It's not a server machine, it's just a normal Windows. So you can just click on this agent and you can now click on the installer. So just click on this installer now. So it will open you this particular ServiceNow. It will ask you to give the ServiceNow instance URL, the ServiceNow mid server username and password. So let me just quickly give it like the particular this, and in interest of time, I have created a mid server user with the username as mid server. It has a role of mid server. So I've already done that. Let me just add this thing. I'll add the password and I'll just test the connection so that it's working. So because sometimes it takes some time, so you can just see that connection tested successfully. Now let me just click on next. It will ask me to specify the mid server. So I'll just specify the mid server name. I'll just say demo server 2 like that. And I click on next. And that's, it will show us what is the configuration that I have set. I can click on next and I can just start the mid server. So it can just say, just set mid server start. So that's how you can install the mid server. Now Now I can go into the mid servers. So now I can just go into the discovery module and into the mid server. And if I click on this one, so I'll be able to see my mid server. It will take some time to load up and it will then come up. So these are already that I have. So now let me just keep on refreshing and you can just see that demo server 2 came up. Right, so that's how it is easy to set up a mid server. Now, one important thing that is always there is like we have to validate the mid server. So always, because you can just see that status is down, and because why it's down, because it's not validated. So let me just quickly validate it and I can just save it. So it takes around 1 or 2 minutes to validate it, and you can just see it's down and it's validating, right? So we can wait till 1 or 2 minutes and it will just show up as validated it. Yes, like this, and status is equal to up. So you can just see that it's running on the mid server user, who is the logged in user and all that. So that's how it's very easy to set up a mid server. Like you just go and extract that thing, add the particular stuff like your username and password for that mid server account. Always remember, don't use the admin user because admin has all the right. Just create a new user with the mid server role and just then you can just add that to that particular thing, right? So I think it will just take some time. So now till the time I have already set up one more mid server, that is demo server 2. So we can utilize that mid server. Yeah, you can just see it's up and running now. So now we can just go to the discovery schedule. So when you type discovery schedules, you can open it and there are two options. One is new and one is quick discovery. So I'll be doing a quick discovery to show you how we can discover a particular CI or something. So I'm using a loopback IP address. So basically what is a loopback IP address? Is loopback IP address is a special kind of IP address which is used to discover the local host. So that's what, because I just want to discover my mid server host, that is my Windows machine. So that's what I'm doing. And let me just select the demo server 2 that is there and I click on this. So now you can just see that there is a new discovery that's being created. So if I click on this thing, so you can just see that first thing in the ECC queue, you are seeing that SAZAM probe is there. So this is the phase 1 or the port scan phase that is there. So SAZAM probe is sent, it sent different WMI, SNMP, SSH probes so that it get to know what type of device it is, right? So if I refresh it now, so this is, just see, this is an output that is there, right? So there's an output that is sent from ServiceNow to that particular mid server, right? So now there is an input that's being returned to ServiceNow from the mid server. So you can just see that it returned for this particular thing. So now ServiceNow will process this particular thing input, and on the basis of that, you can just see it like put the WMI classify. WMI means for Windows, right? Because it get to know that it's a Windows device, so it ran the Windows classify. If I just refresh now, so you can just see that all these Windows classification ran and all these like pattern is launched for Windows operating system. And these are all these things that are happening. So this is in the particular exploration stuff. So if I refresh this particular thing, so you can just see that it's been classified and it's in the identification and exploration phase because of the current activities being identified, right? So now it will take around 2 minutes to discover it. So let's wait for 2 minutes. So you can just see that this two SAZAM one are the particular, the port scan phase. Then the WMI runner or the classify, this is the classification phase. And this thing is the particular identification and the exploration phase. That is what is all in discovery. So it's just like 4 different phases: port scan phase, classification phase, identification, and exploration. So let's just refresh it. So it takes around 2 minutes to discover this thing, because it's going through the internet and returning those response. So basically you can just see that it's waiting for the input for this particular pattern launcher, like Windows OS desktop. So it takes around 1 or 2 minutes more, and you can just see it's being classified as a computer. So all these like computer classifier ran, and all these things classified it as computer. So let's just wait for another 1 or 2 minutes to see it. Yeah. So you can just see that now the input came up, and this is another. So it's now getting the all the application that are there inside of that. So you can just see that if I refresh it, so it has discovered the local host, and let's wait for it to complete. So once it gets complete, the status will change to completed. I can just refresh it now. So all these things are happening in the exploration, identification and exploration phase. So you can just see that this particular like patterns for this thing are launched. So to find the details of that particular device, right? Yeah. So you can just see that the state is completed now. So we have the CI discovered. So if I click on this CI, you can see all the information about my device. So it has like around 12 gigs of RAM, and it has this per CPU speed, and all these things are coming from that from discovery pattern. So you just saw that I didn't do anything. I didn't have to write any script and all. So all these are the features of ServiceNow Discovery. And this is how easy it is to discover a particular CI. So just if you want, you guys can try just to add a mid server to your particular device and just try to discover it. And you can just see that all these things will come up. You can just see that it also discovered the storages. So I have like 1 TB hard disk and another 251. So all these things are discovered, and these are all the softwares that are being discovered in my system. So you can just see that how good it is in discovering all these things, right? So that was all about in the demo of ServiceNow Discovery that I just showed you. So now, guys, that's all I have for you in ServiceNow Discovery. And now you guys can, if you have any questions, you can just post it, your question, and I'll answer. So I see one question. Please explain the phases once again. Okay. So as I told you, like there are 4 different phases. So one is the port scan phase, then is the classification, then identification and exploration phase. So in a nutshell, if I go back to that particular slide, this one. So port scan phase is like, it will just let you know how whether it's there or not, whether there is any active device or not. Classification will just classify it based on that particular, whether what type of device it is. Like if it's a Windows, whether it's a Windows 2003, Windows Server 2008 or 12. And identification will see whether it's there or whether it's not. If it's there, it will update it. If it's not, then it will create it. And exploration phase, it will just explore other things. What else you can tell me about yourself? So that's what phases of discovery is. So another question that is there is service mapping. Do we want to define the business service in advance? See, you don't need to define anything in advance. What you have to do is like you will be having a URL which you use to access that business service, right? So when you give that particular thing, then there are different phases inside. It uses mostly discovery patterns for that. So when all these discovery patterns will be used, and in that we have different, in pattern also we have different phases and all that thing. So there you can use the service mapping for. And another question is there, most of the organization will be having so-called business survey, which may be alter later once we go on maturity. Yes, definitely. As I told you, like infrastructure is very volatile. So all these things needs to be like it will keep on changing. So these discovery schedules that we make will help us making it active. Like it will just make sure that this is the real picture of what our infrastructure is, right? So that's what discovery needs to run on, like on a schedule. It can be in 1 day or 2 day or any other thing. So another thing is like any touch points on mid server sizing will help. So sizing, so mid-server sizing. So what I'll do is like, there is a good Excel sheet that I have created for determining how the mid-server should be. Like it totally depends on the infrastructure, like, and how your discoveries are getting slower. So so the thing that comes in like sizing is like, if you have a lot of IP ranges and your discovery schedules are taking a lot of time, right? Because I have seen one example where one discovery schedule was taking around 5 to 10 hours, right? So we installed a load balancer mid server. Like we divided the work between different mid server and we grouped those things together, right? So that in that way it reduced the load on one mid server and the discovery was happening in less time. So it totally depends on your infrastructure. So what I can do is like, I can share you Excel sheet which can help you determine the size depending on your infrastructure. Another question that has come up is like, how frequently should we discover? So it totally depends. See, so because when you are discovering, it will also impact the like infrastructure, right? So mostly it's sometimes some clients prefer on daily basis in that time, which is like when they're not using ServiceNow. So, but if they're using ServiceNow 24/7, then they can do a weekly one, or like it can be bi-weekly, or depend. It totally depends on how they're using the ServiceNow instance. Because what happens is like when you're running ServiceNow Discovery, so it will just impact the performance. Other things also, because if it's discovering a lot of things and if you have multiple schedules that are running, so it will impact a bit. So we have to take care of that thing, that we should discover in a time in which it's not being used, so that it doesn't affect other work, right? So it totally depends. So I think these are all the questions. So I see one more question. Let me just see. Okay, one of my clients faced an issue with OIDs during discovering two devices get updated with same OID. What could you be troubleshoot method? Okay, so OIDs. So OIDs come into picture when you're discovering the SNMP devices, right? So in SNMP devices, you have something called sys object ID, right? So if you go into like, let me just show you that so that it will make sense to you. So OID. So if you go to the OID information in this, so you will be able to see this is the OID repository. So because OIDs are based on manufacturer, so when you go into your particular SNMP, you will be seeing the particular OIDs. Search that OID here, just enter that thing and see what type of manufacturer is it. Then you can go into the SNMP system OIDs, right? So here you define those things in such a way, like if you click on this, you can just enter the particular OID and what is the manufacturer and model. This thing you can get from the OID repository. So that's what you can do. So I think this will help you in solving your issue, right? So, okay. So one more thing that came up regarding duplicates. When identifier finds a match, will it add a record and mark as duplicate or just ignore it? See, if there is something that comes up, there is like duplicate kind of thing that when it comes up, right? So it will just create a new record if there is no identifier rule that are matching. It won't ignore it, right? So that's why the identifier rules, the all these things should be created properly so that it doesn't like create a lot of like this. So sometimes like that's what I have seen is like in certain classifiers, the identification rule is based on name is on the name, right? But name might be like Windows Server or Windows or something. So we should like make it like name contains, not like name is. You know how the filters and all that thing in that works, right? So it totally depends. So for your question, if there is anything that is new, it will create a new record. It won't ignore it. So can you explain few steps of troubleshooting discovery errors? Is there a tool like command manager to execute prop commands directly from ServiceNow? Okay, so like there are troubleshooting methods. So it totally troubleshooting errors comes totally dependent on your particular phase, in which phase you are working, right? So if you're working in the port scan phase, so you might see errors on credentials. That's the most common error that you see because credentials and all that thing, or the ports are blocked. These are certain things that come up. And the when you're talking about the classification, so in that classification, what can come up is like your uh, like the classifier, like there is no particular classifier that's there, which is not able to, so you have to create a particular classifier. Or again, the credential issue might be there, it's not able to access it. So sometimes you might see that active couldn't classify. So that means that the classifier is not there, or the particular, it's not able to go there. So these are, it totally depends. And coming to the identification and exploration phase, maybe you don't have the proper privilege, because when you talk about any infrastructure device, so one thing that always come up is the privileges, as you have in ServiceNow, right? So ServiceNow will have like different roles, right? Similarly, we have the different accesses in Windows or Linux, right? So you might not have a particular access to access that particular thing. So these are the some of the common things that come up, right? So, and there are a lot other things also. Maybe sometimes you will see like active, like device is active. That means it's active means it means there is no device that's connecting, but the IP is assigned. So these are the certain things that come up. Is there a tool like command manager to execute prop commands directly from ServiceNow? So if I talk about this thing, is there is a debug mode in the pattern designer where you can perform the live commands directly. And so there you can just test those things and see what's the result that's returned. So if you go to the discovery patterns, right? So in that pattern, you will be seeing a particular debug mode. So where you can where you can just execute the particular commands. So basically, when you're writing all these things, you will be using that thing. And there is another option that is command manager in like as you were talking, so you can use that thing also, right? So let me just see if there is anything. So here, if you just define, I'll just quickly type something so that I can just show you. Okay, so if you open this particular, let me just save it. When you open this particular identification section, you will be able to see the particular debug mode on the top. So there you can run those commands up, right? Let me just open this thing. So you can just see this is the debug mode that is there, where you can add your host name and you can just connect it, then you can perform this thing. So right now I can't show you that particular how you can debug using the command manager, right? Because I'm not on a Windows Server machine, so I'm just on a desktop machine, that I need a Windows Server, so I can show you how you exams from there. So that's one thing. So one last minute. Okay. So I think that's all the question that we have for this thing. So Shruti, I'm handing back to you now.
Yes, thank you, Pranav, and thank you everybody for attending the webinar today. Just a quick update, we will be at Knowledge next month at booth number 722, demoing some nice, cool, innovative stuff. So it'll be great if you can come and stop by at our booth. And we'll see you next month, also for our next closed webinar. Thanks, Pranav.
Thank you all for joining. Bye-bye.